Well, thank you, Gail, and it is a pleasure to be here. We love coming to Utah. I have not gotten to Alta yet. I will just point that out. So I have to come back for that. And it's great to be here because so many people here at the University of Utah, both in the physics and astronomy department as well as in SKI, have just been great collaborators. And I just want to tell all of the young people in the audience that the secret to leadership is having an amazing team. And I especially want to thank Professor Zazowski, who's been a tremendous spokesperson in SDSS 5 and has inspired a lot of people. So I'm going to take a bit of some detours in history, and we're going to start way back. So these are the Lascaux caves. Now these cave paintings were done, maybe 20,000 years ago. And what's interesting about these caves is that, maybe it looks like this is the famous Hall of the Bulls. And, there's some structure in there, and we don't really know exactly what those structures are. Are we looking for lights, maybe? Maybe over here? Do I dare press one of these buttons? What do you guys think? 3, you think? Oh, wait, no, that's not a. Oh, these are not buttons. Oh, that's the temperature. These aren't buttons. These are lights. Theorist here. There are buttons that control the lights somewhere here. We'll figure it out. Oh, are they up here? This is the newly renovated.
Don't ask.
Okay, someone's found the lights. Okay. Exactly. Okay, so there are these structures in these caves, and what's tantalizing about these structures, now they haven't left journal articles that describe their studying of the heavens, but it's tantalizing that they may have actually really been trying to map the sky. And it certainly makes sense that they were trying to map the sky for a lot of reasons, for understanding where food was, understanding where they had to go at different times of the year. And I'm just showing here, this is Taurus, and tantalizingly, if you look at Taurus there on the left, in the actual night sky, this is now actual stars, you see there's this constellation called the Pleiades, which is the 7 sisters there in blue, and you also see Orion there in the lower left, those what may have been the 4 stars of its belt, of Orion's belt. Of course, Orion's belt we now see as having 3 stars, so there's an interesting question there as to what maybe happened if it's true that they were actually mapping the sky. What does that tell us about Orion? But the point is, we don't actually know if this was a sky map. What we know, though, is that people seemingly are wired to look for and understand structure in the universe. This is a very deep part of our human wiring, and what we're really trying to figure out is what the underlying order is in the universe, and how we can understand the physical processes that form things, that make those things evolve, by looking for and understanding that order deeply, both from a purely observational perspective and also from a mathematical perspective. And in fact, the Greek cosmos means harmony and order. And a lot of what we're doing when we're mapping the sky is trying to understand that order. So I'm going to take us now a little bit closer in time, but still over 100 years ago, to just give you a sense of what the universe was just 100 years ago. So at this time, you got to remember you've got Einstein's theory of general relativity has now just been published in 1915. And very soon after that publication, you have the first solutions to those equations. That's the Schwarzschild black hole solution. And of course, there's a critical eclipse trip where Arthur Eddington goes and measures the bending of light that's predicted by general relativity and declares it a success. But there was a big debate ranging among the astronomers of the day about what the nebulae were, what the spiral nebulae were. And it was really two kind of debates all meshed up in one. One was how big our galaxy is, and the other was whether the little smudges that people were seeing in their images were inside the galaxy or outside of the galaxy. And this debate is actually recorded. You can actually read the proceedings of it. This is the famous Curtis-Shapley debate. And I think the interesting thing about these debates that we have is that even though they're focused on a specific problem, they reflect an underlying and shared confusion about the nature of the universe. So Heber Curtis was an astronomer who thought the Milky Way was small. And because he thought the Milky Way was small, he thought these spiral nebulae, that is, these smudges that people were seeing in their images, must be outside of the galaxy. If the Milky Way was small and these little smudges were outside of the galaxy, just like a cluster of stars or something, that was no problem at all. That didn't challenge his view of the universe. And on the other side of the debate, you had another astronomer, Harlow Shapley, arguing that the Milky Way was very large. And because he thought the Milky Way was very large, he thought those spiral nebulae couldn't possibly be outside of the Milky Way. They had to be internal to the Milky Way. And what I posit is that actually both of the members of this debate, both sides, were just really suffering from an underlying view that the universe itself was too small to accommodate both a big galaxy and other big galaxies. And of course, this debate was settled by Edwin Hubble. This is the plate that ends the debate with this variable star, var, in red. You can see this is a photographic plate that was taken of M31, and you can see he marked down a star. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner there. He first thought it was a novae, so something that was just brightening, but then realized that it was a variable star. And in particular, it was a Cepheid, and those types of stars, once you know how they vary, you can calculate their distances, and he realized that this must put these spiral nebulae outside of the Milky Way, far outside of the Milky Way. And in fact, the first galaxy map is from 1929, and you can see, well, we've come a long way in making figures. I think you'll agree. It's kind of, now we could do better now. And in fact, what's interesting, this is now looking at the distance of each dot in this figure is a galaxy, and on the y-axis you have velocity. So you're showing how fast things were going away. Edwin Hubble called this the distance redshift relation. So Edwin Hubble did not believe that the universe was expanding, and you can see that as things were getting further out, they were getting higher velocities. All of the numbers on this figure aren't quite correct, but I think the point was that this was a prediction of theoretical calculations, in particular the Friedman and Lemaitre, who had predicted this expanding universe, but Hubble didn't quite believe it, although he was able to make this early galaxy map. And that really kicked off the game of trying to understand new things about the nature and structure of the universe by mapping these galaxies. Because even though you didn't know exactly the underlying theory for what was going on, the maps ended up being very constraining, and people continued this all throughout the 1900s and continue it today. This is an important map from 1977, and this was another major, major kind of state change in how people viewed the local universe. You can see now this is from the CFA redshift survey, and every little dot in this map is a galaxy. Again, you see the velocity and the position in this little pie slice. This is called Stickman because, well, it kind of looks like a stick figure. But what you notice about the galaxies compared to, a map like this, it's that the galaxies aren't just spread evenly throughout this slice. It doesn't look like you just took some marbles and threw them down randomly and they just populate this. It looks like there's a structure, a Stickman structure, but it looks like, you can see there's, a body and some legs, and there's, of course, there's clumping to these galaxies. Why does that happen? Why would galaxies clump together? And of course, the answer is that the galaxies are tracing the underlying structure of the universe, and in fact, they're tracing the underlying dark matter. That is the matter that we can't see. So imagine you're looking at a map of the United States at night, and you can see all of these lights, or North America. You can see all of these lights. That's showing you where the people are living. That's showing you the cities. But it's not showing you exactly where all the land is. So the lights are a biased tracer of the mass distribution. And you can see, in fact, there's a lot of, the mountains are pretty dark. And so the point is, how do we make the connection between these points of light, which are the galaxies shining, this normal matter of stars and gas, and that underlying structure? And we know that the key is in making these maps of galaxies. So the question in the later part of the last century was, how do we map all the galaxies? Now, you got to start with the telescope. And so this is the SDSS telescope. This is not the biggest telescope in the world. It's not the most fancy telescope or most expensive telescope in the world. But this telescope is what's enabled us to make these maps up to this point, and now other telescopes, such as the DESI experiment, are making these. But you get a telescope. You get one in the northern hemisphere, and then one in the southern hemisphere. This is the DuPont telescope in the south. These are the two telescopes that we now use in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. And if you go back to 1990, this is Jim Gunn with the original camera that was making the images of these galaxies. You can see there's a new crop of galaxy mappers here at the University of Utah, and I've just put up the pictures of the professors in the department who raise your hands, guys, if you're in the audience. So for the students and for students young, K to gray, please go seek out these amazing experts to learn more about this. But basically, this CCD technology that is shown here with these filters made it possible to take these digital images and ultimately digital spectra that made all of these telescopes far more valuable. Because not only could the data be obtained, and they could be obtained efficiently, but the data could be shared very easily across the world and analyzed automatically. So this combination is very special and actually enabled really the democratization of astronomy the way we know it. And so what SDSS really set out to do at its onset was to map 1 million galaxies for everyone to have. So instead of having data just in your drawer, everyone could have access to the data. They could look at the data. They could play with the data. They could make their own experiments in the data. And you didn't have to just rely on one professor's opinion. You could verify the results themselves. And the workhorse of that has been the plugplate system. So these are aluminum plates. And what you do when you want to observe a galaxy and get a redshift is you take a fiber and you plug it into one of these aluminum plates, and the starlight goes down that fiber and gets broken up into its component parts, its spectrum. Just like, for some of the younger members of the audience, this is like a physics rainbow. And so you've all seen a rainbow, so you're all familiar with spectroscopy. So whenever I say spectra, you think rainbow. And I encourage you to go look at Gail's plate in her office. She has one of these hanging up. There may be some more around campus. But this plugging process is quite intensive. So this is an example of a typical patch of sky, and each of those green and purple dots show a place where a fiber was plugged into an aluminum plate. And just to give you a different perspective on that, those purple dots are accreting black holes, and those black dots are the green dots are galaxies, and you can see how they map onto that aluminum plate. And every dot represents an object in the sky. But this is very labor intensive. So in order to make this map, and now we're talking about millions of galaxies, someone had to plug a fiber into a plate, thousands of fibers, many times to make that happen. And this takes a very long time to set up in the field. It takes, you have to plan these plates many months in advance, and then you have to drill them and plug them, and that whole process takes a very long time. And that means that you're limited as to how quickly you can look at an object. But what we know is that the sky is very dynamic. So what I'm showing here is over time. This is from 1900, and this really should be viewed in a dome. But you can see these flashes in the sky. So these flashes in the sky are supernovae. These are stars that are exploding. And you can see as we start getting into the 70s and 80s and 90s, we start getting more and more people with telescopes, more and more reports of these supernovae. But you can see that big stripe there is SDSS. This is now, as of 2016, these are all of the recorded supernova. Now there's even more, and with things like the Vera Rubin telescope, there'll be even more. But the point is that the sky is changing every second of every day. So there is a new sky every night. So in order to probe that new sky, we need to be able to get on these targets quickly, which means we can't use this plug plate technology anymore. We have to move to robots. And so we're big robot fans, but basically when you, and I'll just skip over that. I think that this is how we can tile the sky using robots. So instead of having just plug plates on the sky, we can actually probe the entire sky from the north and the south using this robot technology. And basically, all we're doing is changing one part of the telescope. So we use the same old telescopes, but we reinvigorate these telescopes with new technology. And it's really great to see how these, you don't need to build a new telescope every time you want to do something new. You can actually use really innovative instrumentation, and a lot of this instrumentation is built at university labs. So it's really important to support these things. This is one of our robots moving around. So you can see it's sitting on a plug plate, but you can see it has an arm, and it sweeps out an area in the sky. And this is how these robots move in the sky. Oops. I think that'll just play. So this is from one of our graduate students, Connor Sayers, who figured out the code to make a lot of these robots move. You could see, I think, any second now, let's see, there we go. There we go. So those are some targets on the sky. So now instead of having a plug plate, we have these robots that move along the sky to match these targets, and we can reconfigure all these robots very, very quickly. So if something goes off in the sky, we can just move a robot onto it very rapidly. And you can see the robots move around and reach their targets. And this is work by Connor Sayers and Jose Sanchez Gallego, who leads our our team. This is pretty. It's a pretty easy way to rapidly survey objects as they're changing in time. Here, we've put our robots now. I've taken those aluminum plug plates now, and we're showing here all these robots in their configurations off of the telescope now. But now this has been installed at Apache Point Observatory in New Mexico at that Sloan telescope. This is just a cool pattern that they made by lighting the fibers up from the back. And this is how they move in physical space. So I showed you how they moved on the sky, but this is how they kind of writhe around instead of having a plug plate that you plug in, now you just have these robots that move around and chase these targets. And these types of systems are how we're mapping all of the galaxies in the universe. And if you want to talk about mapping galaxies and making those big galaxy maps, the state of the art has moved to the dark energy spectroscopic instrument DESI, which Kyle and Zhang can tell you all about. And so with these smaller telescopes, we have opportunity to really look at other objects in the sky. So SDSS has had multiple phases. I told you about the getting 1 million redshifts phase. That was phase 1 and 2. Then in phase 3, there were 4 projects that they looked at in SDSS. One project to map stars, another project to do cosmology, and another project to look at planets. In SDSS 4, which has just concluded, they had 3 projects, one to look at galaxies, one to look again at more stars, and another to make what was the largest map of galaxies known to man until, I don't know, Kyle, do you guys have more galaxies than SDSS 1 to 4 now?
We have more galaxies than all projects in the world combined.
Yes. Yeah, so that now, yeah, so now, humanity has gone from mapping 1 million redshifts to now 10 million. And we're gonna stay on the line. Now, why do we do it? Why do we do all this? And then, of course, I'm the director of SDSS 5. I've just put the previous directors up there. And one of the interesting things is that SDSS has always been guided by theorists. So that's really weird because, as you saw from the demonstration earlier, theorists can't even find the lights in a room. Okay, so. But why is it important to have theorists guide these huge empirical projects? And the reason is because these are really experiments that we're doing in the sky, experiments that are meant to test different ideas about the nature of objects in the universe and to push our understanding of these objects. And it's really important for there to be a very, very close collaboration between theorists and observers. In order to make that happen, because what you're doing in theory is very different than what you're doing in observations. So some guiding principles that I take is that the universe is real and can be known and understood. So not a simulation. This is not the Matrix. Even if it is, we're going to figure out the source code. We all have the capacity to participate in this process of discovering the universe. Finally, we all have a responsibility to protect this flame of scientific inquiry. And we have a responsibility to protect it for future generations. And we see some of them in the room tonight. So thank you for coming. Science advances by freedom of thought. So what observers do is they make these really sharp rocks. That is, they make experiments that decisively can distinguish between different theories. And what theorists do is we spend time crafting these beautiful models and beautiful theories and beautiful sailboats that then must be dashed upon these rocks. And whatever survives is what we think is a reasonable approximation of truth. And whatever doesn't survive, we have to part with, no matter how beautiful, beautiful it was. This process of theory and observation and its loop is absolutely critical to understanding how the world works, and it's really necessary right now because not everybody is down with reality, and that really prevents us from talking to one another. It prevents us from understanding one another. It prevents us from coming to common ground. So this is a really I'm talking about science with a little s, the inner scientist that's in everyone. I call it your inalienable right to physics, and I think it's important to get people in touch with that. So what science are we doing in SDSS 5? Well, so in SDSS 5 we have 3 mapper programs: the Milky Way mapper, the local volume mapper, and the black hole mapper. The Milky Way mapper is fundamentally concerned with how stars form and evolve in the universe, and in the Milky Way in particular. The local volume mapper is fundamentally concerned with how galaxies regulate themselves. So how do stars form and then feed back on the material that they formed out of to prevent more star formation? And the black hole mapper is really how black holes, the weirdest objects in the whole universe, how they formed and evolved. And we're looking at over 5 million stars in the Milky Way at high spectral resolution. That means we're able to see lots of different features in the spectra. We're looking at many different spectra of a few galaxies in the local volume mapper, and we're looking at about 500,000 black holes in the black hole mapper. And the key thing with all of this is that we're going back and looking at these objects in time. So we're not taking a snapshot, we're actually looking again and again to see how they change. So I'm going to go through these a little bit. The black hole mapper is, I'm showing the spectra. You can actually see stacked spectra in the background there, and I've just highlighted some of those spectral lines. Now, humans have confronted black holes theoretically for hundreds of years, actually. And observationally, we've only confronted them for about the last 100. And most of the time, we didn't know what we were looking at. So what is a black hole? So it's a hole because it's a mathematical singularity. This is the Schwarzschild solution to Einstein's field equations, where space is infinitely warped. And it's black in analogy to thermodynamics. So this is a infinitely absorptive boundary or a black body. There are 3 parameters: mass and spin for sure, and possibly charge to a black hole. So they're very simple systems in some sense, very simple physical structures, except we don't really understand what's happening interior to the event horizon. Now, we think that black holes are in all big galaxies, so like this one at the center of the Milky Way. Now, how do we know there's a black hole at the center of the Milky Way? Well, the same way that we look at how the planets go around the sun, we can look at how stars orbit the center of the Milky Way. Now, it takes many years, and you have to have an infrared telescope to penetrate all the dust in the galaxy. But actually, if you have a lot of patience and a lot of stamina, you can actually watch these stars over time as they orbit. Now, this is a black hole that's no longer growing. So the black hole at the center of our Milky Way did all of its growth in the past. And now, occasionally, a star gets too close and maybe it'll get shredded up. But mainly, it's done acquiring its mass. The process by which these black holes grow is called accretion. And that is a process that emits a tremendous amount of radiation. And we can understand how black holes grow by looking at that accretion structure. That's really what the black hole mapper is. One of the major aspects of the black hole mapper is trying to understand that. Now, there's no surface to black holes as far as we can tell. So how does something with no surface go from taking baryonic material and accreting it into into itself to grow bigger. And this is just an artist's rendition of an accretion disk. So you have a black hole at the center, you have material that's falling into that black hole, and you have jets that are emitted from that black hole. And then we're just, diving in, but this is all just someone's imagination. We don't know how that works in detail. And what we're trying to do in the black hole mapper is look at this accretion disk structure in more detail so we can really go from this artist's impression to actually a real deeper physical understanding of how these black holes grow and change in time. Because when black holes are feeding, they're among the brightest objects in the universe. Now, again, I'm going to take a little detour, a brief defense of pure reason. So in the 1700s, Immanuel Kant wrote a critique of pure reason and argued that we couldn't really understand the world because we just had our senses and everything was just a hallucination. And this idea is coming back, actually. You see a lot of famous neuroscientists are saying things like this. So I wanted to I disagree with this. I disagree with Kant and the famous neuroscientists on this point, and I want to explain a little bit why. So Newton writes his Principia in 1687, and he makes the first binary star prediction. He generalizes Kepler's laws to other stars, okay? And 100 years later, this is around the time when Kant is telling everybody, there's no reality, it's all just in your head. Other people are taking Newton's theory and going through the math and going through those calculations and taking the theory to its natural conclusions. And in particular, John Mitchell and another person, Henri Laplace, were thinking about how if you had light, like a bullet being shot out of a cannon, you could have something so massive that light wouldn't escape. So they were reasoning based on escape velocity, which comes out of just Newtonian physics. What is the speed you need to escape the gravitational pull of an object? And they were arguing, and I've just put their old papers up here. They were arguing, they were arguing that if you actually had something so massive and small that even light couldn't escape. Now, of course, light isn't quite bullets coming out of a gun. Light's a little bit different. And I like this quote by Argelander: "Happily, hypotheses, even if full of error, fail us not." So what does that mean? It means that even wrong theories, when properly tested, can reveal deeper truths about the universe. Now, Mitchell and Laplace were thinking about light in this way because, Newton told everybody that light was corpuscular, that it was basically like a bullet. And of course, other people around the time of Newton had different ideas. So Christian Huygens said, I think that light is more like a wave. And Newton, didn't buy that, and kind of, no one took Christian Huygens seriously. And it was not for hundreds of years until Fresnel did his study of diffraction that Huygens was vindicated, that actually there's this wave nature to light as well as this particle nature to light. Now, I go into this detour for a few reasons. First of all, it's super important that we take these theories to their natural conclusions and we keep on working through what they imply. And second of all, wrong ideas can last a very, very long time, right? You can suffer under a long idea for hundreds of years, and it's important that we look out for those wrong ideas and we do our best to keep those wrong ideas very short. Don't give up on a good idea that you have. So just whenever you're feeling like you're not getting credit for your ideas, just remember, and this is for the students in the audience, Just remember poor Christian Higgins. I mean, Newton made fun of him for this wave thing, and he was ultimately proven right. But so don't give up on your good ideas. And for the scientists in the audience, try not to dismiss good ideas. Test them. That's how we make progress. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with our black hole mapper. We want to test this accretion hypothesis, the idea that black holes are growing through these accretion disks, and those accretion disks are changing in time, and that's reflected in their spectra. Now, the Milky Way mapper is our second big mapper in SDSS. The Milky Way mapper is looking in infrared light at millions of stars in the disk of the Milky Way to try to understand how the Milky Way itself formed. The Milky Way is just a regular galaxy. And if we can understand how the Milky Way formed, it means that we have insight into how all kind of regular galaxies form. So if we zone into this sort of picture of the Milky Way, you can see the Milky Way has hundreds of billions of stars in it. And it's really a crucible for understanding not just the physics of galaxy formation, but also the physics of star formation. How do stars form? How do stars evolve? Here I'm showing what we've learned from apogee so far. And so this is just a movie showing you can see those spikes. Those are the apogee spectra and how far out in the Milky Way we've been able to observe. And apogee's been a tremendous boon for astronomy because we have this huge sample of stars in the disk of the Milky Way where most of the stars live. Now, I know that you guys saw this picture about 5 years ago when Kyle and Gail were here giving this lecture, but I think it's really, I had taken it out, but I was convinced by one of Gail's students to put it back in. This is kind of the state of the art with the current apogee survey, with the current SDSS survey, SDSS 1 to 4. So if I imagine that I'm sampling the Milky Way, according to that survey, this is what it looks like. And with SDSS 5, instead of sampling a few 100,000 stars, we're going to be sampling millions of stars, and we're going to be sampling them contiguously. And so that's what we would be sampling if we were doing SDSS 5 on this model of the Milky Way. Of course, this is Jean-Michel Basquiat painting. And I think the point of this is to just show that if there's a lot of substructure in the Milky Way, it's very hard to probe it with these plug plates because they don't have the close density to really see all of that substructure. But with SDSS 5, we'll be able to do that. Now, finally, our local volume mapper. Our local volume mapper is really aimed to try to understand a very peculiar fact about galaxies. So there's all this gas in the universe, and in principle, this gas could form stars. But in fact, galaxies are huge underperformers in terms of star formation. So they do not turn most of that gas into stars. They turn a tiny fraction of the gas into stars. And the question is, why? What is happening? What we think is happening is that galaxies are blowing themselves apart. So we think that galaxies are, this is now a calculation of galaxies. What we're looking at is the temperature of gas as it goes into galaxies. And this is now on a very, very, very large scale. So each one of those little bubbles is a galaxy like the Milky Way. And you can see as this calculation moves forward that these galaxies are heating huge gas bubbles around them and preventing that gas from then cooling and forming stars like the sun. Now we have lots of different models lots of different theories for how this process proceeds. And we don't know which one is correct because right now the data just gives you the bulk properties of the galaxies and all of the theories predict the same thing. So in order to figure this out, we need to actually zoom in. We need to zoom into the place where these stars are forming and where they're providing energy and into the interstellar medium that is the material from which the stars are forming. So here's a typical, this is Orion, that's that same region that I was just showing. Here are stars that we're observing in apogee or ultimately in the Milky Way mapper. And in our local volume mapper, we're going to be getting spectra at every position of that image. So these physics rainbows, for some of the younger members of the audience, will help us decode the physical conditions of the gas. So instead of having this simulation, which is blowing apart these galaxies, or different simulations that are doing different types of violent things to the galaxies, we're going to have a data set that'll really be able to test this. And I just highlight Bei Wang, who's in the audience. You guys should definitely talk to her, because what do we do with this data set? This data set is unprecedented in terms of what we've been able to observe before. And Bei and her team, working with Anil and his team, and Gail and her team, and others here, are going to help us figure out what features are in this data in order to understand it. So finally, I just want to end with a note about data. And I don't know if, I didn't see Joel Brownstein here, but Joel heads our data team here at the University of Utah. And of course, we're very grateful for the CHPC's support of SDSS. A huge advance in SDSS was making the data not just available to people, but usable. And that's really turned it into a powerhouse of not just the science that the theorists envisioned, but all of the discoveries that everyone else in the world envisioned. So to date, there's been over 10,000 papers published with SDSS data, millions of queries per year, hundreds of help desk requests, thousands of students. So this data set it's not the biggest telescope, not the most expensive project, it's not, but having data that's publicly available and usable with tools that are usable and interfaces that are usable really makes it possible for everyone to get involved. So I call our citizen scientists really pioneer scientists. They're figuring out things that we didn't anticipate in the data itself. And so finally, what's next? Is there a Moore's law for galaxy redshifts? This is just showing galaxy mapping from around 1980, when it went into its industrial phase, to project it into the future. So we've talked about SDSS and a little bit about DESI, and we think the next phase is mega mapping. That is trying to keep on. You heard that SDSS originally aimed for 1 million redshifts and kept on going. DESI already has 10 million redshifts. So I like the phrase 10x or die, and so we would like to exceed the state of the art by another factor of 10. And just to give another kind of view of what this mapping looks like, here is a video that was put together using OpenSpace by Alexander Bach, and I'm so grateful to SKI for having developed this software that allows us to navigate and visualize all of the galaxies that we've, not just the galaxies that we've mapped, but any other kind of data set. And I can't wait to see OpenSpace navigating the Milky Way mapper and the local volume mapper and the black hole mapper. And you can see, far from Stickman, every dot here, of course, is a galaxy, and we're going to zoom out all the way to our furthest observable point, which is the cosmic microwave background. That's what we know from these mapping surveys. That's what we are trying to analyze still, trying to crack important questions like what the dark matter is and what the dark energy is and what the nature of the universe is. So, so with that, I will just conclude. Make maps, not war. Please join us in analyzing this data, and thank you so much for your attention.
So what I'm proposing is that the questions come to the audience and Juna repeats them.
We'll do that.
So in your office,
Okay.
So in the number of galaxies that you showed Moore's law, is the estimate 10 to the 12? What is the current estimate of
Yeah, so
galaxies that might be out there?
yeah, so the question is how many galaxies are in the universe? So this is an estimate of basically the big galaxies, the Milky Way and above type galaxies in the universe. Of course, we don't know exactly what the mass function of galaxies look like and when it turns over. And the smallest galaxies are not in this plot. These are just the big galaxies that we think we can map using kind of our current or kind of envisioned technologies. It's going to be pretty hard to stay on this line, but it's a log scale. But that's the estimate from the current mass function that we have for galaxies. But there's many, many more small galaxies, and these small galaxies are very interesting because the big galaxies are telling us about this large-scale structure, but the small galaxies tell us about the details of dark matter on small scale. So if you wanna have a coherent picture of dark matter as a particle or maybe as something else, then you need to be able to explain both why the large-scale distribution of galaxies looks the way it does in various statistics, but also the structure of little galaxies, whether the dark matter forms in a kind of peak in the center or whether or not it has a different structure. And those profiles are very important. And these small galaxies are dominated by dark matter, and so they're very interesting. Yeah. Oh yeah, so that's a great question. What is a galaxy? Not so obvious, right? So if you have a cluster of stars, right, physically it can be the same as what we call a dwarf galaxy in terms of its extent, but what it doesn't have is a dark matter halo around it that's keeping it together. It's just being kept together by the gravity of the stars. So you can have so what makes a small galaxy? When I say small, I just mean mass. So typically, the Milky Way is around 10 to the 12 times the mass of the sun, something like that. And a small galaxy can go down to 10 to the 6, 10 to the 7, 10 to the 5. We don't really, there's sort of a threshold for when you can form stars in a galaxy that has to do with that temperature, the temperature at which you can't cool stars anymore, or you can't cool the gas anymore to form stars. But I think the threshold of galaxy formation is an active area of research. Like what is the smallest galaxy? There are galaxies that seem to be formed not from this dark matter process where you have a potential well and gas falls into it and cools and forms stars, but forms from dynamically in mergers and that kind of process. So that formation channel, these aren't these types of galaxies. These guys form the old-fashioned way, the now old-fashioned way of dark matter potential well. But some of the smaller galaxies form in these other ways, and it's interesting physics in those smaller systems. But yeah, these are not all the galaxies in the universe, but they're all the big ones that we think we can measure. Because to be honest, I don't want to be talking to my grandkids about dark matter and dark energy. Like, I want them to be making fun of me because we used to talk about dark matter and dark energy, because obviously those are weird terms that don't mean anything, right? And so we want physical understanding of those things. And I want them to be talking about axions or this particle or this mixture of things, and not, this like, ooh, there's something out there, right? I mean, yes?
Very early on in your presentation, you had a graphic where
Yeah.
There was a saturation going down to the lower left.
Yeah.
Was that the galaxy? Is that the Milky Way
N-
jet, or is that something else?
That is a very good question, and that is something else. So that's SDSS. So the way that these, I'm going to just play this video again so you can see them popping off. So, people were observing supernovae, and then you're going to see, so this is 1945, 47, 51. People are observing these supernovae. And a lot of supernovae are observed by amateur astronomers because they're really bright in the sky, so you don't need a huge telescope. And that's a huge area of really active citizen science, and it always has been. But you can see in 2000, that thing, okay? So what that is Stripe 82, which was a survey of SDSS. It was a sub-survey where they took one patch of the sky, and they went over it again and again and again and again.
Okay, so it's just a saturation rather than.
It's a reflection of.
It's not a jet. It was
Yeah.
just coming off the center.
Right. Right, and that's because it was a strip that was that you could actually see from Apache Point. But that just shows the pattern of observation. So in fact, the whole sky looks like that. But that's just the bit that we were able to probe in that very small survey. And with SDSS 5, we're hoping to see that all over the place.
Many of your graphics were fabulous. I just wanted you to.
Oh, thank you. I take many of them all of them probably came from other people. So that I will, and thank you. I appreciate that.
Are there some like long-term goals or like general purpose to what your research is trying to achieve?
Yeah. Long-term goals and general purpose. Well, so what we're trying to do is understand how these structures form and evolve and how it compares to our theories, right? So we have this theory of galaxy formation that we were just talking about, where you have these dark matter substructures and they merge together, and the small galaxies merge together to form big galaxies. And I showed you the movie of the temperature, where the galaxies were injecting energy into the gas and preventing stars from forming. We want to know if all of that is right. We want to see if any of that is correct. And the only way for us to see if that's correct is to, well, we could do more calculations the way Mitchell and Laplace and others were doing and say, oh, there's a problem in the calculation itself, there's an error here. But we also need to take these types of survey data in order to provide, those sharp rocks that we can dash these theories on. So we want to understand how these structures are forming and evolving all the way from black holes all the way up to galaxies. And ultimately, we want to understand what the fabric of the universe looks like. So what does the universe actually look like in detail? So I would say it's many different aspects of that same arc. If you care about stars, then you really care about probing how these stars are flaring over time, because that's telling you about different physical processes inside. If you care about black holes, then you care about this accretion structure, because that's showing you how these black holes are growing in time. And if you care about galaxies, you care about the local Volumemapper, because that's showing you why stars don't form as much as they could. The efficiency of star formation is really low. Why is that? Why doesn't the universe just turn all the gas into stars like really quickly? It's weird, and we want to know why. So in terms of, and I would say that another benefit of the survey, so that's why I do the survey, but why does anyone give me any money to do this? Like, why should anyone pay for this stuff? And partly it's because a lot of the techniques that we develop in doing these surveys end up being extremely useful for whole other areas. So a lot of data science itself and a lot of the techniques and tools and machinery that people use in data science for commercial reasons, a lot of those actually have their origins in things like SDSS because the data was made freely available, it was well documented, and tools were available so people could play with it. Whereas when you have data that is where you can actually make money, like stock market data or oil well data, that data is much more restricted. So you don't have that full breadth of human kind of firepower that can work on it. So I would say the reason I do it is because I want to understand how galaxies form, but I think the reason why anyone funds us to do it is because there's a broader impact of the work.
My question kind of, you addressed some of it there. Thank you for the presentation. It's made this very accessible. I really appreciate that. But my question is, science is often limited by resources.
Yeah.
What do you see are your resource limitations? And you just talked about some of how you get past that. What do you see are the limitations? Is it creativity? Is it money? Is it instrumentation?
I mean, with this crew, it's money, definitely money. I mean, big time. So what I have found that, and it depends on the question, right? So in the areas that we're probing in things like SDSS and DESI, there it's really financially, like getting the resources together, Megamapper, getting the resources, the financial resources to actually kind of build these things. There's technological limits. So the type of stuff that we're trying to probe is sometimes you just don't actually know if it's physically possible to make a reliable motor at a scale that you need to make, right? But engineering is always, that can be, hardware is hard, as they say, right? So there are limitations there. I would say in more esoteric areas, like more theoretical areas, like trying to understand dark energy, for example, or trying to understand the dark matter, I think there you have a few different limitations. Resources is one of them, but it's also you need more frameworks to effectively navigate a space of ideas. And that, I think, we were talking about the great debate at the beginning of my presentation. When you're trying to navigate those spaces, there's often common things that we kind of take for granted, common ideas, like paradigms that we just take for granted. And the next thing is very different from that. And it's often, where do you get, where did Newton come up with action at a distance? Well, he came up with it from kind of trying to figure out how to turn like lead into gold, like from alchemy. So we get these inspirations from other areas that are, just navigating that space of ideas, which is a really important part of the scientific process, and is a very difficult. You can't write that down in a few steps, and you could throw a lot of money at that and not make progress. So it's really important, I think. I think a limitation in the future is in really having those safe spaces for curiosity-driven, free-thinking kind of research. I think that's really important. It might not seem useful, or it might not seem like there's an immediate kind of gain, but that's how we get sort of really transformative changes in our understanding. And the same was true when people were trying to wrestle with dark matter. So it's true that people had these ideas about, okay, I think, even Fritz Zwicky in the early part of the 20th century thought, well, these clusters seem like they need more stuff to stay together. But it wasn't until much later where we had a lot of anomalies that forced us to this weird matter that we can't see, that's everywhere, that's most of the matter in the universe, right? So we've been driven to this really weird part of idea space. And how do we navigate it in a, humanity, if we survive, we will navigate it. But, when you get to a certain point in your career, like, you want to navigate it fast. And so that's where I'm at. Thank you. Yes?
What new data do you anticipate getting from the James Webb Telescope?
Okay, the question is, what new data is coming from James Webb? So James Webb is going to be transformative in many respects, and Anil, I think, is doing great work on this. I think Jung also is a JW person. I don't know if there are any other JW people in the audience. JWST is going to allow us to see in the infrared galaxies way further back in time than we've been able to really probe before. So when you're sitting on the ground with your telescope, you've got this atmosphere to deal with, and even when you have a really big telescope, there's a limit as to where your detectors work, at which point all of your key lines go to a part of the spectrum that you can't probe them anymore. And with JWST in the infrared, you're going to actually probe those lines and understand not just galaxies, you're going to understand the galaxies that we've been observing in much more detail. You'll understand them much better because we've just reached the limit of what we can do with our instruments on the ground. But you're also, hopefully, you're going to see galaxies that we've actually not been able to see before because they've been sort of beyond what we can do with our ground-based detectors. And that is truly exciting. In particular, I'm very excited about what's called the era of reionization. So I showed you the cosmic microwave background at the end of that movie that Ski produced, that Alex Bach produced. That recombination is when the hydrogen recombines. Basically, you start with this hot soup, and then you get the electrons and protons. They come together. You've got hydrogen. There's also reionization. You start to get stars forming. You start to bust apart that hydrogen. And that's why we can see galaxies at large distance, because most of the universe is transparent. So that kind of epic of heating and ionizing the universe by those first generation of galaxies and stars, that's what we really want to see with, that's one of the things we really want to, that's one of the things I really want to see with JWST. Other people want to see things like signatures of water on planets, for example, and maybe you can see something like that in the spectral signatures that you get from JWST. But to me, I want to see, I've been thinking a lot about Galileo recently. I don't know if you guys often do this, but sometimes he just comes into my mind. And I just, everyone was pointing the telescope at the ground. Like they were pointing microscopes at the ground or at little things, okay, to see the small world. And Galileo was like, let's look up there. And that's the first time in humanity that you could see all of those stars, like the first time ever for our species that you could see all of those stars that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. And with JWST, it's one of those moments again where we're seeing things that were not actually possible to see. They were hidden from view. So it's, sometimes you open a curtain and there's nothing there, But most of the time in astronomy, the universe is just infinitely creative. And when we open that curtain, there's always stuff that, whoa, like, what was that about? And I think one of the nice things about black holes is that they're an example of where, people had thought about these weird ideas, and everyone was like, okay, that's really weird, like, stop talking about that, all these theorists, like, blah, blah, blah. And then you open the curtain, it's like, oh, those things are real. How weird. And so I'm really excited to see what's behind the JWST curtain, and I'm hoping it's just nothing like what I have in my mind.